to be a part of the wheel of life, what some know as the Kali Yuga. We were going to be in that age where right would be made to seem wrong and wrong would be made to seem right. Are we not in that time?
Yes.
Okay. And because we knew this was going to happen and we left those messages for ourselves, we find ourselves drawn to those stories and talk about Heru. We can talk about various different aspects of indigenous culture. We're drawn to sacred symbols such as the Ankh, Jinyame. All of these are symbols that we left for ourselves. For ourselves, so that when we returned, we would activate our own chakras and remember. This is a time to remember. In the story of Heru, and this is where we get to the root chakra journey, we must first reflect on the Divine Mother, Ast, or Aset, or Isis, and the Divine Father, or Aser, or Osiris, and Aser's brother, Set, who was really his lower self, because it was really about the inner journey. And as we began to review that story, we were told that in this main version of it, because there are a few versions, we were told that Set invited his brother, Aser, to a vacation down the Nile. And so they went and they were partying, chilling and having a good time. And they married sisters. And then Set went back and sent a message to Aser saying, oh, there's an emergency in the temple. You must come. And when Aser returned back to the kingdom, Set had tricked him. Had tricked him into climbing into his own casket, into going into the box. You know what the box is. You know when you're thinking inside the box. People tell you to get outside the box, open your mind. And so, Aser got in this box and Set nailed him up. So how does that translate into root chakra energy? Well, Aser represents the higher self. Set represents the lower self. So that is symbolic of one being trapped in their lower nature, being locked up, stuck in their lower nature. Okay? Now, just consider that if you knew that somebody was coming and they were going to take over your stuff, you would want to make sure that they knew how to take care of it, right? Because they had already proven that they didn't know how. When Alexander the Not-So-Great came into Kemet, tore up the libraries, burned the libraries, he already showed that they didn't know what to do. So we knew we had to do something to be ahead of the game, so to speak. So the Moors, taking that sacred charge of 700 years, going up into Europe and civilizing the Europeans, had to happen in order for this sacred journey to truly begin. And so, as karma would have it, we worked with them as navigators. As karma would have it, we worked with them as traders. And our petty differences that we had with other tribes, we allowed that to get in the way of our unity. Our petty jealousies, our insecurities, our greed, all of those are human traits. They don't have no color. We allowed all of that to get in the way. So that when the dramatic hordes came onto the continent, in the form of the Arabs, and they began the slave trade, the Arab slave trade, we helped them. We don't like to admit that. We hate admitting our part in it. Think about that. You done something, and now you got to be accountable, and most of the time you point your finger at somebody else. But it's your house. Why'd you let them in there? You stole your brother and sister, but you was mad because, sibling rivalry and stuff. And then came the transatlantic slave trade. And all of our children that we turned out, turned our backs on them. They said, "Oh, Mama, you gonna nurse me." And we became their nursemaids. Did we not? Did we not? Did we not, as black women, become the nursemaids for master's children? Karma is a bitch. Okay, come on this journey with me now. Y'all still with me? Now, what that did was to begin to awaken the latent melanin in our neglected brothers and sisters. Black woman's breast milk is the most potent food on the planet. You talk about some superfood? What? Think about that. So now they're getting the DNA. Okay? Melanin is starting to be activated because everything has some melanin in it. It's just whether it's latent or not. And once you start to get certain things activated, just like our set began through doing yoga, tantric yoga, and chanting, she raised the vibration. So their vibration began to raise. That's why they love listening to our music. That's why Massa was always creeping in the slave quarters. And the missus was always calling the buck upstairs when Massa was away. Why you think we so many different shades? Now the same madness on many levels was already going on here too, because the same petty jealousies were happening among the 5 tribes of the indigenous ones here. And we also allowed for divide and conquer, also known as the Willie Lynch plan. We allowed for that to take precedence, and thus the fall. And we found ourselves in a box, in a coffin, just as we had been prophesied to eons ago. And slowly but surely, the music, nature, the stars, the planets continue to move and spin and twirl around, and we began to stir from that root chakra consciousness. Because anytime you're trapped in root chakra consciousness, you're in survival mode. Can't move, you can't think, all you are doing is surviving. Yes? And yet we knew, because we are the original star children, that's right, each and every one of you here are the original star children, because we knew we had a job to do to usher in this 5th dimensional consciousness. We set this whole thing up so we could take this journey to go from 3rd dimension to the 5th. Now, most of the time people say, well, what happened to the 4th? Well, the 4th dimension is actually a doorway. 4 points creates a door. That's the journey. The fourth dimension is the journey. Get the pearls along the way. Because the pearls that you gather along the way will determine the wealth and prosperity and blessings that you will receive with what you are creating in the fifth and sixth and seventh dimensions and so on. Because guess what? Life is a continuum. And so we stayed in this root chakra consciousness till 1920s. And then we began to have an activation. As slavery had been so-called abolished, but we were still being enslaved. It's just a different kind of plantation. We began to remember. We began to see Africa as a part of ourselves. Now, during those times, the indigenous ones were not necessarily identifying with being indigenous because they didn't want to go to the reservation. So, those of us who were already here passed either for Negro or white. And it wasn't talked about because you didn't want to go to the reservation. Do your family research. Find out who's who. Find out who's been sitting on that information. Find out. The original Native Americans look just like you. They wore locks. Yeah. But don't take my word for it. Please do your own research. I invite you to remember you. And so, we had these shakings and these rumblings and these vibrational frequencies that began to activate the remembering. Because remember, from the darkness comes the light, and light produces heat. Vibrations are what comes from the darkness, and that creates the light. Light produces heat, heat produces heat waves, thus vibrational frequencies. That's like what comes first, the chicken or the egg. Some people call it the cosmic bang, the big bangs, when the initial movement happened in space that created all of this. But either way, everything has a vibrational frequency. And its vibrational frequency is stored within the Akashic Record. The Akashic Record is known to many as simply the collective unconsciousness. In ancient Kemet, it was called the Hall of Records. Among indigenous people, it is known as the dream time. And we all have access to it via our sixth sense, our psychic sensitivity. And you can tell by your hair. Even if you're bald, you got hair somewhere else on your body. So just like eyes for sight, ears for hearing, nose for smell, our hair is our antenna to the universe. And so, that began to be activated by our music, by our passion, by our desire to be free, and by the cosmic clock that said we gotta be ready as the vortex is beginning to be opened. Now, what vortex is this am I talking about? Piscean age had transitioned, and there was an overlap always an overlap as Aquarius began to present itself. And so, we saw a lot of movement in the 50s of different nations beginning to claim their independence. That moved on into the sacral chakra, the color vibration of orange, which deals with healing and nurturing and tribe. We began to identify with ourselves as beings who were free. We didn't know how to make the freedom manifest quite yet. We had ideas about how to do it, but we couldn't quite agree on how. So we had various different movements. We had the Theosophical Society with Madame Blavatsky, who was a teacher of the noble Drew Ali and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Marcus Garvey. And they began to combine metaphysics and finance and freedom. And they started various different movements, which began to lead our people toward a frequency of well-being and higher consciousness. So, in the 60s, we had the experience of the solar plexus movement, the color of gold. And of course, now remember, all these decades do overlap. The energies, the frequencies do overlap as we go into the decades. We had the solar plexus activation throughout the 60s, where people were beginning to stand up even more forcefully for Black power, for nationalism, Pan-Africanism, things of this nature. And then we take the journey on into the 70s, and we see more heart chakra energy, where we began to really truly define ourselves and love ourselves and see ourselves other than Negroes. We began to say, well, are we Black? Are we African? Are we African American? But it all came from the whole space of self-love. Then we come into the 80s. Now we're dealing with that throat chakra energy. During this time, our music, the vibrational frequency began to intensify, and we had the birth of reggae, rap. We also had the onset of full-on biological chemical warfare called the crack epidemic. Our people didn't even know what hit them when that bomb was dropped. And because it was a crack in the consciousness of our being, it was also a crack between the worlds, because the dawning of the age of Aquarius was upon us. And during that time, the crack between the worlds unleashed all kind of demons and all kind of higher beings. Began to see it in movies and cartoons and everything like that, because you know the truth has to reveal itself, and it's going to reveal itself in ways that people can get it, because spirit wants to be remembered. Our higher selves knew that we had to remember so that we could be ready for this time. And so in come the 90s, and in come the indigos, that first eye, which some of you know as your third eye. What that meant was that now you have beings who are born with their first eye wide open. They ain't got to do no extra work to activate that first eye. That's what indigo means. Not everybody is an indigo, because there were some people who chose to not wake up. You have that option. That's called being human and having free will. As we move into millennium of the 2000s, then we now have those crystal babies that came in the 2000s, that first decade. That meant their crown chakras were open. Not only their first eye, but their crown chakra. So their throat chakra is open, everything is opening up. Those who came after 2012, they are lit. These babies, their chakras are fully activated. Have you taken the time to just sit with these young elders? You cannot just say any randomness to them. They will put you in check quicker than you can blink your eye. Why? Because they came here to be sure that the prophecy is fulfilled. The prophecy that once again, the last shall be first, and the first shall be last. Everywhere on the planet, you've been told that you don't know what you're doing. There's no such thing. All in an effort to keep you from taking your rightful place as light workers, star seeds. The veils between the worlds are so thin right now, you think something and it's happening in the next couple minutes. As we are moving closer to the star system, to the main star, Sirius, we are receiving an abundant amount of energy and cosmic light. Those of us who are waiting for the return of our star seed ancestors have to be ready. You don't have to take my word for it. It just depends on whether you know who you are. And if you're a part of that tribe, that clan, that star system. Maybe I'm getting a little too far-fetched for some of you. But if you're still here, I'm pretty sure you can relate. I mean, how many times have you acknowledged that you are not from here? You look around and you're clear that your biological family got you here and they raised you, hopefully. But really, they're not your people. We give thanks for all vehicles, all portals. You know, you may drive up in a Honda, you may come up in a Lexus, but the fact is you got here, right? You may have taken MARTA, but you got here. And that's it. So, essentially, we are the light. We are the Heru. We are the star seed. We are the planetary placeholders. Meaning that wherever we go, we help to stabilize the frequencies of that area just by our beingness, just by our consciousness. Okay? And are you a guardian of Gaia? Gaia being another name for Mother Earth. Do you pick up the trash when you see it? Do you take the time to learn about the herbs and the plants of the planet? We only have this one home until we're able to leave. And then we might decide to stay. We do have that free will. Either way, shouldn't you know your home? Yeah. And so, perhaps you are one of the mothers of Ma'at, totally being the embodiment and essence of truth. Perhaps you are one of the fathers of the ancient future, coming from the future to the present to remind us to remember. And if you are activating the masculine and feminine energy within yourself, you're whole and complete. And I'm not talking about being confused about your gender. That's not what I'm talking about. Talking about you accepting yourself and your wholeness. Myself, and those like Mama Emma. I don't know if there are any other elders here. I had invited some of my elder friends. Are you all here? Sahuel, Ifany. Come forward. Come forward. Those of us who are elders. We were here in Atlanta in the 80s, 90s, and we helped to establish the frequency in the West End. Ifany and many of our family members, we called ourselves the New Being Tribe. Baba J. Rue, I know you were in D.C., but you could come on over here anyway, because I know you were holding it down in D.C. We are the bringers of the dawn. We are the ones who came to create the platform for you. We are the ones who came to be sure that you could wake up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for not hitting the alarm button and going back to sleep.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank us.
We are the ones who went through being teased and called names for being vegetarians. We're the ones that were called all kind of names for locking up our hair or shaving our head, depending, because I was bald for 14 years. Shaved it. We're the ones who chose to change our names when it wasn't popular at all. We're the ones that chose to meditate and to do yoga when that wasn't considered a black thing. What you mean? You not black? Nigga, what's wrong with you? You better eat some of this pork right here. But we did good, fam. We did good. Yeah. Before us went through even more ridicule, more trauma and drama. Our families disowned us. Some of your families are still doing that. But trust and know that the light that guides the way is within you. It's totally within you. You have to honor your gifts. Honor your intuition. It's your higher self that is talking to you so that you become your own leader. You become part of a one-mindedness, which again, Dr. Jewel Pookrum talks about morphic resonance. I mentioned it yesterday. Look it up. Morphic resonance frequency. It's the same thing that makes birds all fly at the same time. Makes those fish all turn right at the same time. There was an experiment done called the 100th monkey theory. And they took this group of monkeys that were found in various parts of the world, and they had the control group in Africa, somewhere on the continent. And these scientists taught these monkeys how to use a tool, and the tool was to use the leaf to drink water. So the control group was the group that was actually taught, and every time a monkey learned to use the leaf to drink water, that monkey was tagged, their ear was tagged. And there were scientists posted up all around the world where this particular monkey was found. When they reached the 100th monkey, all of a sudden, all of the monkeys that were of that particular DNA species or strand, DNA strand, knew how to use a leaf, even though only one group, the control group in Africa, was actually taught. But because their DNA is the same, they were in that one-minded frequency, morphic resonance. That's morphic resonance. Look it up. Don't just take my word for it. Do your own research. The number for humanity is 144,000. If you're dealing with any kind of sacred geometry, you know. Familiar with the 144,000. It appears throughout all indigenous cultures. Now, it won't necessarily take the completeness of 144,000 for us to be woke, because melanin magnifies. But you have to purify your melanin, just like a crystal, because melanin is a crystal. It's primarily composed of silica. So that's why it's so important to have a clean livet. Ideally, consuming at least 75 to 80 plant-based food. Ideally raw. And if you insist on eating meat, make that only 5% of your intake. That 15 or 20% needs to be maybe your cooked foods. Because live foods give you life. Real simple equation.
Very simple.
That's part of the success of the raw reality. Because you taste the life. Now, you know, an apple by itself could be delicious, but you may not eat it every day. So the goal then is to make sure it's delicious so that people will consistently come. You know, people ask, what is the magic that I work to make the kale so good? I said, well, our main ingredient is love.
I say.
And people have not, as a whole, experienced love, real love, with any kind of regularity. So you come and you get your dose here. We got it for you. And that's why when there are people that work here that have bad attitudes, they get fired. Maybe not soon enough, because a lot of people are good fronting in my face. But they eventually get exposed. Just like all toxins, and they get fired. And they actually fire themselves because they can't hold the frequency. What we do as culinary alchemists is to heal you using food as medicine. Dr. Sabi taught that. Queen Afua teaches that. Dick Gregory taught that. I invite you, pardon?
You.
Oh, yes, me too. Dr. Aila Africa, yes. Who else? Call out some names. Well, I already said Queen Afua. Anyway, there are not a lot of names that can be called out. Why? Because, you know, we're just awakening in our consciousness. These are those of us who have gone, and I said Dick Gregory too. These are those of us who were the pioneers, like Queen Afua, Dr. Sabi and them, Dick Gregory, they, even I have to even say, Jethro Claus, he wasn't African, but he still was on point. Victorus Garolitis, you know, the Adama, Bob Marley. Who else? Patrice. Mother Patrice. Brother Aris. Oh my God, how could I forget Aris? Aris is my teacher. Oh my God, my Jegna. Yes, he is. Aris Lathan, the master teacher, Sunfire Foods. Look him up. Yes, Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He wrote the book, How to Eat to Live. You know, there are some teachers. Again, do your own research. You know, let the food talk to you. Let the food heal you. Let the food activate you. Let it clear out the mucus in your eyes so you really can read auras. Okay? Yeah. Let it clear out your lungs so that you can actually practice pranayama. The the yoga of breath. Clear up your circulation so your brain can get enough blood and oxygen so you can think more clearly. And we talk about freedom, justice, and equality and a revolution, but most people can't run a mile. And if you're into smoking a lot of herb and blunts, you might not be able to make it down the block. Okay, I'm not trying to step on toes, I'm just speaking facts. Just fact. And especially if you're smoking this GMO herb that's out there. Okay, just saying, deal with homegrown. You know, your heirloom herb. You're gonna deal with it, deal with the real. Because the herbs and plants were put here to help us to heal. Plant medicine is a teacher, it's a guide. I don't support the random use of it. That's what gets us into trouble. Take the time to respect it, it will guide you. And it will open doors and portals that will take you to places that can be truly enlightening. But meditation can do that too. You know, so yoga can do that, Tai Chi can do that. Climbing Mount Kilimanjaro could do that, right? Take you to a whole nother level. But anyway, what I'd like to do right now, thank you for going on that journey. We say thank you first. And then just acknowledging yourself as the children of Aquarius rising. We are here to build fifth dimensional consciousness. The fourth dimension is the actual journey itself. Why do you still find yourself here in third dimensional consciousness? Because the dimensions exist simultaneously. Okay? So, an example of what fifth dimensional consciousness is this whole COVID thing. I personally do not know anyone who has suffered during this whole pandemic. I know of some people who actually say they had COVID, but they never went to the hospital and they definitely didn't die. They had the flu. Okay? They had the flu. The people that I've noticed that suffered in any way was either from their thinking, because they believed the hype, or their diet. And they had some kind of pre-existing situation which compromised their immune system. So in this day and time, as we are being bombarded with biological and chemical warfare, it is so important to have a strong immune system. And because we're not tearing down 5G towers yet, they've done that in many countries. They haven't done that here yet that I know of. Then we have to be able to be sure that our body can withstand that level of radiation. So you need to big up on your seaweed. Okay? Kelp, sea moss, dulse, any type of seaweed will help to neutralize radiation. Of course, your chlorophyll will. You know, so it's really important for you to protect yourself. Okay? So that as you are moving forward as spiritual warriors, you're standing for integrity. I would say this last part before I move into an exercise that I would like you to do, which is called soul gazing. It's really crucial that we deal with our hygiene on all levels. Most of the time, we just think about our hygiene from a place of getting in the shower or the tub and washing the body. But what's happening with our thoughts? Do we wash our thoughts? It's something that needs to happen all the time. What's happening with our emotional body? You know? What's happening with our spiritual body? So I liken holistic hygiene to brushing our teeth. I brush my teeth in the morning. I brush them at night before I go to bed. And if I'm eating kale, you can trust to know I'm washing them through the middle of the day. You know, even if it's just swishing water in my mouth or getting a toothpick or flossing, I am dealing with my hygiene. I know if I've been eating garlic or something that could be pungent and offensive, I'll ask somebody. But first, I'll even be aware and present to whether people are backing up or covering their nose. You know, I'm just keeping it real, right? Being present to your environment. And I might ask, you know, my breath cool? And I'll ask somebody I know is not gonna lie to me. Okay? So it's about, you know, really checking in with yourself and being present on the planet with your whole being. Do the same thing with your thoughts. We create stories, we judge people, we create all kind of madness. We assume it don't even be what we thought it was. But it's a whole situation. Emotionally, we all twisted and out of order. And we find it wasn't even that. We're reacting to something that happened to us 10 years ago, and we're projecting that stuff on what somebody said to us that didn't have nothing to do with the situation. So our emotional, mental, and spiritual hygiene is just as important as our physical hygiene. So I invite you to be present to yourself. Cleanliness is next to godliness. Yes. And as light beings, light workers, star seeds, we got to keep our shine, right? And that's what's up. So quickly, I'm going to do something. Is the DJ still available? Can we do this little activity right quick? It's called soul gazing, and I know